kind of background. So, during his tenure as the American ambassador in Russia, Cassius Clay carved up a whole string of Russian aristocrats, including one archduke whom he killed, one heir to the throne of Russia. Not only did he engage in a great deal of fighting, but he also had amorous adventures while he was there. He probably had an affair with several members of the royal family, including the Tsar's daughter, perhaps even the Tsar's wife. And when Cassius Clay came back to America, he brought with him a child that he'd had with a Russian ballerina. Well, everything that he did that would have scandalized society if he'd gone to England or France made him a hero in the eyes of the Russian people. And the Russian aristocrats, finding themselves thwarted in every move, always tried to trick him into a fight. This is from another biography of Cassius Clay by David Smiley called The Lion of Whitehall, The Life of Cassius Clay. Clay felt right at home among the Russian noblemen who were as yet serf owners, and he said were very little different from American slave owners. He acted as though he were back home in the Kentucky bluegrass, and he never went out unarmed. He had brought with him bowie knives of every description. The ferocious blade remained his favorite weapon. He had a pearl-handled knife with an 18-inch blade for formal attire. But for everyday wear, he had an assortment of bone-handled knives. It was not long before his pugnacity had brought him challenges to duels from rapier-bearing Russian noblemen. As he thus had the right to choose the weapons for the fight, Clay always selected the bowie knife. This choice upset the suave swordsmen, and they plotted more than once to trick Cassius Clay into making the challenge so that they would then have the choice of weapons. Then they promised themselves Mr. Clay had better beware. Having made such plans, two Russians found the American minister in a cafe, eating his dinner. One of them stepped forward and slapped Cassius Clay on the cheek with his glove, and then stepped back to receive the minister's card and a challenge to a duel. But Cassius Clay was never one to stand upon a precedent. He owed his life to his ready defense. He jumped up from his chair, doubled up his huge right fist, and with the full force of his strength, hit the meddlesome Russian squarely on the nose. Overwhelmed by the unexpected blow, the trouble-seeker went down, carrying with him a storm of falling china. Clay looked around belligerently for further opposition, and seeing none, parted the tails of his frock coat and sat down to resume his interrupted meal. He was gathering a reputation for himself in St. Petersburg for his quick pugnacity, which aroused the admiration of his Russian hosts. Stories of his bloody fights circulated all over Europe, as well as back home in Washington. Incidentally, there were many people who in 1864 believed that Cassius Clay should join Abraham Lincoln on the presidential ticket. Lincoln was looking for somebody from a border state. Kentucky is the perfect choice. Cassius Clay's credentials as an abolitionist are certainly strong, and the abolitionist wing, the radical wing of the Republican Party, wanted Clay on the ticket. Lincoln instead chose somebody from another border state, Tennessee, who was a Democrat, and upset the radical Republicans. But imagine, once Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in 1865, Cassius Clay would have been president of the United States had that happened. Well, Clay probably deserves a great deal of the credit for encouraging the Russians to send their fleet to the assistance of the United States. There is evidence that he endeared himself to the Russian people, and the Russian people believe that if the Americans are like this, they deserve our support. So that factor involved in the arrival of the Russian fleet. After the war itself, to continue Cassius Clay's story here, Clay returned to America, and you might think that now that he was a retired diplomat, that he would, and the war was over, there were no more slaves, that he might discontinue his carving activities. But you would be wrong to think that. He continued to fight. At the age of 84, Cassius Clay got married. The bride was 15 years old. A reporter at Cassius Clay's wedding said, "Clay is in excellent health, erect and muscular as an Indian, and bids fair to live many years if he will only quit fighting. They're writing about an 84-year-old man. If he will only quit fighting, he's going to live to be an old man. Well, once again, the community was outraged. Here was an 84-year-old man taking a 15-year-old girl as his bride. And the community in eastern Kentucky decided that something had to be done about that. So a posse was formed to go to Casious Clay's Whitehall plantation, arrest him, pick up the girl, take her back to her parents. Here's a letter from the sheriff explaining why that mission failed. Richmond, Kentucky, November 14th, 1894. Judge John C. Chenault, dear Judge, I'm reporting about the posse like you said I had to. Judge, we went out to Whitehall, but we didn't do no good. It was a mistake to go out there with only 7 men. Judge, the old general was awful mad. He got to cussing and shooting, and we had to shoot back. The old general sure did object to being arrested. Don't let nobody tell you that he didn't. And we had to shoot. I thought we hit him 2 or 3 times, but don't guess we did. He sure didn't act like it. And we came out right good considering. I'm having some misery from 2 splinters of wood in my side. Dick Collier was hurt a little when his shirt tail and breeches was shot off by a piece of horseshoe and nails that came out of the general's old cannon. Have you seen Jack? He wrenched his neck and his shoulder when his horse throwed him as we was trying to get away. Judge, I think you'll have to go up to Frankfort and see Governor Brown. If the governor can send Captain Longmire up here with 2 light fielders, he could divide his men and send some with the cannon around to the front of the house, but not too close, and the others around through the cornfield and up around the cabins and spring house to the back porch. I think this might do it. Respectfully, Joshua P. Simmons, High Sheriff. That didn't work either. At the age of 93, Casious Clay had his last fight with a Bowie knife. 3 young men broke into his house one night. He sent a servant for help, and the next morning when the sheriff arrived, one of the young men was running down the road and turned himself in. He found the second man in the front yard. He had bled to death with a naval wound. And the last young man he found in Casious Clay's parlor with his jugular cut. 2 out of 3 was not really bad for a man 93 years of age. But Clay sustained wounds in this encounter and died a few months later, ending a very glorious diplomatic career. So for a number of reasons, America seemed to have been spared the threat of foreign intervention. Lincoln's diplomatic skills, the Emancipation Proclamation, and choosing exactly the right ambassador to the right places gave America the opportunity to solve its own problems itself.